This is Harlem Community Radio, EHCR online. And I'm Brother Leroy, your host temporarily because the Wisdom Table consists of seniors who will be taking over, and they may not rush into it, but it will at least be periodically handling the hosting and getting the guests, etc. And this program does not reflect the views, attitudes, whims, deeds, or any other proclivities of the management of EHCR, nor that of the administration above them. However, the program does reflect the research done by the participants in the program who are live on phone and here in studio. Once again, I'm Brother Leroy with Sister Eva and Sister Shirley and others to join us. And today's topic is how to guide your grandchildren's education towards a better paying job in the future. And we will add and also motivating them to consider starting their own business. Our guest online is industrial psychologist Dr. Edwin Nichols. Thank you for joining us, dear brother. Please proceed with your recommendations on how to increase your child's education, that is, maximize your child's education, your grandchild's education towards a better job and possibly owning their own business. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brother Leroy, and to all the participants in your radio program and study group. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share concepts and ideas with you. And in terms of it, there are several things to go over with you. There's a lot of feedback. Okay, are we there now?
We can hear you.
Is that better? Okay, very good. All right, the first thing that I wanted to say is that the school environment today is different from any other time in history. Unfortunately, we are expecting teachers to do more than to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. We are demanding of them that they practically act as a social worker, a psychologist, and a therapist, and a provider. Unfortunately, many children come to school and they have not had breakfast, nor will they have lunch unless it's provided by the school. There are children who don't get a chance to get into a bed and go to sleep at night because they're sitting on the couch waiting for whoever is going to watch the last television program to go to bed so they can sleep on the couch. You also have situations in which some children are being abused physically, sexually, and unfortunately psychologically, by calling them names and putting them down and things like that, calling them dumb and stupid. So in terms of how that works out, it would be a social worker that would try to get better living conditions, would be a social worker that would try to get meals for them. It would be a psychologist that would try to deal with their abusive environment, not just what physical abuse is happening to them, but to see things that a child that early and young should not be seen. People on drugs and situations like that. So we are asking of our school teachers more than they are trained to provide. They are not psychologists, they're not social workers. And with all of these problems, they hardly have time to teach what they're trained to do, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic. That being said, then what is your responsibility as a grandparent or a parent in looking at your child to see that they are going to reap the maximum benefit from the school environment? Some questions you need to ask yourself is, does your child go to school daily? Now, sometimes you send children off to school and you assume they have gone to school, but they have not. So you have to check daily to make sure that they go to school and stay in school all day. Then you have to check to see if they have homework. And if you ask, they will tell you no. But if you talk to the teacher will give you what the homework is for a week and make sure that they do what they are told to do. Now, sometimes children will do the homework, but they won't turn it in when they get to school. So what you have to do again is to make sure that they turn it in. Now, you're saying, oh, that's a lot for me to do. Well, it's a lot for you to do initially, but once they get the idea that you insist that they do the homework, that they turn it in and turn it in on time, and that you are checking to make sure that that's done, then it will become habit for them. And you can spot check from time to time, make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do. Now, there are times when children there are times when there are children that have not understood what the teacher has said. They don't understand what the work is, or they don't understand how to solve the problem. Teachers today have time in the course of the day, because they teach so many classes, to have special tutorials for children after school. It is your responsibility to check with the teacher, and when you find that the child is not doing well in some aspect of their arithmetic or whatever they're doing, you need to get a tutor. Now, tutors don't cost that much, but in the long run, whatever you pay them for the child to get back on track and understand what that is they're supposed to be learning, it is more than worth the amount of money that you spend. Some churches have after-school tutoring because you now have retired teachers or retired servants or people who went to college. Some of them go to college, but they can teach children how to read and how to do arithmetic and solve problems. So if your church has that sort of tutorial after school, you make sure that your child or grandchild gets into those classes to catch up in an area in which they're short. Now, why is that? Because in our system, if you fail, let's say if you pass geometry, but you pass algebra, but you fail geometry, sometimes they won't offer you the opportunity to take advanced algebra or trigonometry or calculus, and you miss out. So when the child fails a math class, that sort of stops where they're going, and in today's society, you need advanced mathematics in order to do the computer sciences necessary for programming, analysis, and so on. Now, another question is, are you satisfied with the teachers at your school? Sometimes school systems will take poor communities and put the newest or the worst teachers in there, because in the better communities, those parents are vigilant and they are saying, we don't want that teacher in our school, get us someone else. And they put enough pressure to insist that that poor teacher, that irritable teacher, that teacher who's borderline depressed or whatever it is, or alcoholic or drugged, that teacher is out. Well, where are you going to put him? You put him where there's no noise, where people don't seem to understand that they can move teachers that they don't like in their school system. So they end up, these broken teachers in broken schools, and go about the task of breaking our children so that they don't learn. Now, do you know what is being taught? Does what is being taught reflect the qualifications for tomorrow's job? So if your children are only getting basic arithmetic in the 9th or 10th grade, they're missing out on algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus that gives them a job in the 21st century. Well, some children say, well, it's too hard. I can't do it. Well, it's not hard if they get the tutoring and if they put their mind to study. It's the only way that children are going to have a job in the 21st century. They must have the math skills. Without the math skills, they won't survive. Now, why do I say that? I say that because we are in globalization. Globalization is the future of the world, not just the United States. And our children are in competition with children around the world who have better schools, who have higher demands for graduation from their schools, and are better educated than our children. I mean all American children, not just minority children, but we don't rank very high in terms of how well we educate our children in the United States. So in order to correct this, we now have STEM programs, STEM. That's engineering and mathematics, science, technology, engineering, and math. That's STEM. And those STEM programs are where the biggest scholarships are now for college. So if your child goes to a high school that offers advanced placement classes, which means you take this course and if you pass at a certain level, you get college credit for it even though you're in high school. Or if your high school offers the International Baccalaureate, then those courses are, when you get to college, you don't have to take those classes because you've already had them. Now, kids that do very well in STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math, get scholarships because that's what is being paid for by the government now, because that's what the government needs in order to survive in the 21st century of globalization, competition with foreigners. Now, the next thing is there are children that are not bound for college. It may be they just don't want to go. It may be that they don't have all the skills necessary. But there are jobs that they can have. So let me give you some examples. We used to think that trade school was a horrible thing, and only the dumb kids went to trade school. Well, that's not correct, because a plumber makes more than a school teacher. Okay? Just keep that in mind. The trades that are very interesting would be computer and electronic repair. Did you ever think when you get on the bus, there's a machine there that you put your card to or put your change in? Well, those machines are run by computers. And those computers fail from time to time, and someone has to be able to go in and reprogram that computer or fix what is computer. Now, those are very important kinds of jobs. Now, also, there's another kind of job that we think about, jobs that are going out of existence. Now, what do you mean by that? How, when you were growing up, some of you remember going by a jewelry shop and seeing a watch repair shop, a man sitting in the window with his lens in his eye, and he's fixing and repairing watches. Well, fewer and fewer of those things are possible, and then after a while, you don't see them at all anymore because we throw things away and replace them. But there are still people who have expensive watches that need repair and clocks. But when you go to a place where the man is old and there's no apprentices, nobody that wants to go and learn his trade, he would be desperate if somebody joyful, if somebody high school age would come in and start spending evenings with him learning the trade. And very often when they die, they pass it on to that individual, which means all the tools and equipment that are necessary to have and operate that trade are there. So that's one example of things like that. Now, there are those of you that have children who are very good in sports, have gymnastics. Well, there's now a whole group of training that's called professional care. And these are fitness coaches. These are people who go into the home and have people do exercises, push-ups, and so forth. And when you look at the Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, she has a physical trainer that comes in every day. It's a black man, and he does physical exercises with her every day. And you can imagine he gets a good check, and he's teaching her how to keep her body and her mind in a good fitness shape. So don't discard children and think that every child has to go to college. Try to find something that they themselves enjoy and can do well. Give them an incentive. Now, again, there are one child that's very artistic, well, and good with his hands. When you look at the ceiling in very large buildings or in some very expensive homes, they have a cornice across the top, a border around the top of the ceiling that is very fancy. Sometimes it's fruit, sometimes it's vines and leaves. It's all different shapes. Well, those are made with plaster Paris mold. Somebody has to carve that image out and then make a form for it to be produced. Well, the child who has good artistic skills and good skills with their hands and learn that trade. So there are many trades that pay exceptionally well, but children have to spend 3 years learning in an apprenticeship program, learning how to do it. Sometimes it's even longer. But if they're interested in it and they do the work, the reward is great. So all children don't have to go to college, but they do have to learn to do something that gives them an income. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is psychological. Unfortunately, there are many school counselors and school teachers, primarily white, but there are some blacks who think the same way. They think that black boys cannot learn, and just pass them through, giving them a piece of paper that says high school diploma is enough. Sometimes they'll say, well, if he gets a D in the class he passed, well, a D doesn't, what is a D? It just means that you attended. It doesn't mean that you learned anything. And many counselors and teachers, when they look at black young men, they think they're not smart enough to learn anything. And all we want to do is give them a D so they can get by out of my class and go to the next class. But they haven't learned anything. And when you see these people counseling your son, your grandson, saying, well, don't worry about it, you have a D. A D is good enough. Then you are to be very, very concerned about that, because that person is crippling your child. That person is crippling your child. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about also is don't look for the system, once your child is educated and out, to be fair. We are part of a systemic, institutional, white, racist society. Now, what does that mean? Systemic means the whole country, in law, in medicine, in every field that you can think of. The whole system in the United States is racist. Now, institutionally says this is the school system, this is the job system, this is the restrictive housing system. All of these things we have documented and proved where the government itself has been co-opted into preventing blacks from living in certain areas, getting loans for money and so forth. We say, well, illegally it's changed. Well, the court has changed it, but the practice is still going on and it's still the same. So my thing is, don't raise children. You have to politicize black children to recognize that the system is not fair. Now, here's the semicolon, however. As a child, you must be in a position to demand fairness. In other words, don't look for the system to be fair. However, you yourself must be in a position to demand fairness. Now, what am I talking about? When a person has a contract and they are expecting to get the money for the contract. They have 3 or 4 people working on the team. If none of those people can do everything that is required for that contract, that person does not get that contract. Okay? That person does not get the contract. They don't fulfill the contract because they can't complete the job. Let me give you an example. A friend of mine is a graduate engineer from Notre Dame University, top engineering school. He worked for Procter & Gamble for several years, and then he went out on his own. There were factories because he was a specialist in running assembly line factories. Like you have to make so many boxes of cereal or so many boxes of soap or so many boxes of whatever it is, and if something breaks down on the line, so many packages of frozen food, so many cans of tomatoes or whatever the product is, it works on an assembly line, and that is a mechanized line. Now, he's a specialist in doing that. So many of these places, while they can do other parts of the engineering process, they don't know how to fix those lines and make them work properly, right to the second. But he does. So he can demand fairness. When he goes into a company, they don't like him. They don't want him to be there. And as soon as they think he's fixed it, they push him out. But he gets the salary he wants because he's the one that can demand fairness, which means pay me the same thing that you pay the white boys, or pay me better. Because I'm the only one here that can do what you need done in order to get your product. So when your child is understanding that the world is not fair, but you have to be so good and so top and excellent in your field that you demand fairness, pay me the same thing you do the white boys, or better. Those are the points that are necessary to prepare our children politically and psychologically for the world in which they live, which is systemic, institutional, white racist society. And top education is the only thing that trumps colorism. Okay? That engineer is black. And even though he's black, and you have all these white engineers there, he's the only one that can do that type of work. So even though they're white, they have to hire him because he is demanding fairness. He is the top. Our children have to strive for excellence and be at the top. All right, Leroy, that's what I have to do, and I'll listen for any comments that the people have.
Okay.
There is so much feedback on this, I don't know what's going on.
Well,
the line has not been clear.
No, it's all right on this end. You're coming through clear on this end, so that's the important thing.
All right.
And the term politicized for this group is something that you have to explain. What do you mean by politicize?
Okay. Black children have to recognize that they live in a world that is not fair to them because they're black. Okay? They have to recognize that parents give to their boy, if you're going to give the driver's license, not talk. Well, why is it necessary to give your child talk and other people don't have to give their child the talk? It's because they live in an systemically institutional white racist society, and the child will be killed. So just like you have the fear about them driving and not understanding how to interact with police if they're stopped, not if, but when they're stopped, then they have to understand that that the television program, that all the programs and advertising that you see, you look at and see. Let me give you a perfect example. I'm a psychologist, and there are courses in what they call continuing education for psychologists. Now, the recent epidemic of these drugs that people are taking in Columbus, Ohio, and so on, and they're killing all of these young white people, that was happening in our neighborhood years ago, and if anybody was caught with any drugs at all, they were put in jail for 30 years. now that the epidemic has hit the white community, oh, we need treatment, we need facilities, we need to train. Oh, we don't want to punish them by putting them in jail. They're sick, they need treatment. Well, that's a perfect example of your child not understanding when they take any kind of drug at all, they're not going to get the same treatment as the white guy did. So they have to understand that there are things that others can do that they can't do because the system will come down doubly hard on them. Now, the continuing education brochure that came to my door was about drug addiction and this particular type of drug that these white people are taking. But the model for the picture in the brochure, in other words, the model that was going to say, look at this model and this is a drug-addicted person. Do you think he was white? No, he was black. And his hair was like mine was before the evidence was erased. I'm now bald-headed, so there's no evidence there, if you understand what I'm saying to you.
Right.
Okay? So politicizing your children gives them the reality that they are going to encounter racist behaviors all the time. That when they watch television, if you ask, who's the drug dealer? You'll see the guy come in, you'll know who the drug dealer is. You see? So, and now, with drug money, they pick up these guys who are drug king. They call him a drug man. Okay, he's a big guy that gets 3 or 4 neighborhoods and he has money. But he has to buy his drugs from someplace. And now they can give you a telephone bill. And on your telephone bill, it will tell you every single phone call you made and how long you talked and the telephone number to whom you spoke. Yet the police cannot tell you where the top money is going, who's making the money off of all these drugs. They can't tell you that. Okay? They can't tell you because they don't want to tell you.
They won't tell you. They don't want to tell you.
Those are the things that our children have to be politicized about. They have to recognize that it is not fair, it's act against them, but in spite of it, they have to be in a position to demand fairness for themselves.
Now, Doc, in terms of that, what is the language and the concepts that you drop on these children so that they don't take their blackness as a curse? You know, I didn't get the job because I was black. How do you energize them in the opposite direction?
Well, that's going to happen, Leroy. That's going to happen. Let me give you 2 examples in my life. I had to go to Europe to get the training that I did because industrial psychology, the faculty didn't want to train anybody black for it, so I went to Europe and got it. All right? I did my internship, not at some small factory in Michigan, but at Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart, Germany. And I was tough. I came back home, and there was a large company, consulting firm, that had taken one of my students that I supervised in Germany, gave him a practicum in Cleveland, Ohio. And he had this practicum in Cleveland, Ohio. He got ready to go back to Germany. They said, oh, don't go. You don't need a degree. You don't need this. You don't need that. We'll pay you any amount of money to stay. He said, I'm going back to Germany to finish my degree. But my supervisor is in Detroit, Michigan. Why don't you ask him? He just returned from Germany to come over here. Oh, they were so excited until I walked through the door. And it was some mistake. Okay? So I was more than prepared, but they didn't hire me. Now let me give you another example. I thought, well, Lord, I just only have a master's. I need to get the PhD. I need the doctorate. Well, I went back and I got the doctorate. My doctoral dissertation is on the apprenticeship program. In Flint, Michigan, in 1960-61, they were opening the General Motors College of Engineering. And the man who was in charge of the psychology program, which is to select candidates to develop apprenticeship programs and all these things, read my resume, talked to me on the phone, and was so excited for me to come to Flint because he had the job for me right away. I had everything that he was asking for. I walked through the door, and his face changed. And after, I'm trying to figure out, well, what else, what other information does he want? And he said to me, you know you should not have applied. You're a Negro. We were Negroes at that time. So, discriminatory behavior. But what I'm telling you is that I didn't get that job, but I certainly got many jobs, other jobs, much better and more productive. And you have to think in terms of sometimes jobs aren't for you. Because now and I'm 86 now. What would I look like with a big house in Cleveland, in Flint, Michigan, with the brown water running out of the tap? And I wouldn't be able to sell it and get out of there, and I'd be stuck up there in Flint. God saw a plan that was more important for me than that job was for me. So you have to have faith. Now, with small children, let me give you this example. There was a little boy, about 8 years old. Both of his parents were school teachers. His mother was 4th generation school teacher, and his father was 3rd generation school teacher. They taught in Washington, D.C. They lived in a new community outside Washington called Columbia, Maryland. It's a planned community. And the houses out there were strictly for middle class to upper middle class. In other words, they were expensive housing, brand new housing, but expensive. So this couple moved out there because they were trying to develop a totally integrated community. You had these well-to-do blacks, whites, all of them out there together. Now, the houses were so expensive that the salaries the school teachers were making to come out there and teach they could not afford to live there. This little boy was in talented in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade. When he got to the 3rd grade, they took him out of talented and gifted. They said he was immature. All right, well, his parents were upset. They came to me to find out what was wrong with their child. I sat the little boy down, I talked to him for about 2 minutes. I said, there's nothing wrong with this child. So I recognized what he was experiencing in terms of racism. This was the smartest little boy in the class. And every time the teacher would ask a question, he would raise his hand and give the answer. Now, he would raise his hand, and she didn't call him. She's calling everybody else. He just blurted out the answer. And the teacher said, well, that's not fair. You're not giving everyone else a chance. Well, what that teacher was trying to do by putting him out, she was trying to say, if I'm trying to teach you as little white boys that you're smarter than any black person, and the smartest one in the class is black, that's called cognitive dissonance. So as hard as she tried to make little white boys feel superior, they couldn't feel superior because the black guy was completely superior over all of them. Now, what did I do to make sure that he understood what the game was? I explained to him, I said, who's the smartest one in the class? He said, I am. I said, well, who does the teacher call on first all the time to see if they have answers? The white boys. I said, so she's trying to prove to them that they're smart. But they don't know the answer, because it finally comes back to you again that you had the right answer. So I said, I'm going to teach you a game. This is what I want you to do. When the teacher says, 12 times 12, I want you to write the answer down on a piece of paper and turn it over. And when she goes all around the room asking 2 or 3 little boys before somebody gets it right, then you hold up yours and show that everybody that you had the answer before. So that's not distracting, that's not being disruptive in class. You see how I got over her pretense that he was disruptive?
Right.
Now, what I did was I went to the principal and I said, I'm Dr. Nichols. I'm Chief of Child and Family Mental Health for the National Institute of Mental Health, giving grants for research studies throughout the nation on child and family mental health. I want to know who is the licensed psychologist that said that this young man should be removed from talented and gifted. They said, well, it's not a psychologist, it's a teacher. I said, well, what are her credentials? You see what I'm saying? She didn't have them. So now what did I do after the principal? I said, now, this is a 4th generation one parent, 3rd generation college educated. And if they're not getting satisfaction in terms of how their child is treated here, you'll have to go to court and meet your lawyer to explain this behavior. Oh, there's some mistake, there's some mistake. So then I went down to the teacher, because that's the source of the trouble. And I told her, I said, you're a racist. And of course, the first thing you start to do is to cry. I said, don't cry, because it's not going to help it. You're a racist, you know it, and I do. And I'm watching you to make sure that you don't cripple this little black boy with your racist behavior. Okay? So now that's now you don't want children, just want them to observe and come back home and tell you what's going on in that classroom. They don't have to make the fight themselves. You make the fight as a parent. But they come home and tell you what's transpiring in that class, who's doing what and who's getting what credit.
Got it. All right. The table is open, Wisdom Table. Dr. Edwin Nichols is our guest. This is the Wisdom Table, coming to you over East Harlem Community Radio.
Well, I didn't hear all the conversation, but I did hear some of it. Charlene Davis, I'm speaking. I can understand what you're saying about the children, because my grandson started school, kindergarten, and his parents are not college graduates or anything like that, but they started teaching him the moment he came home from the hospital, because those babies can be taught.
Sure.
When he started, he knew his ABCs, he could count to 100, he could spell, but the teachers that they had in that community, in that school, were not qualified to teach him. I think they were like what you said, they were sent from a better school because they were failing. And the community, when you send teachers from a better school that's failing at that better school to a poor school, that school is going to fail too.
Of course.
And the schools that they had put him in, all the schools were failing. They didn't want their son to, I didn't want my grandson to fail, his parents didn't want him to fail. So they had to move, and they're living with me now, and he's not going to a failing school. They had to move out of that community, and since they didn't have money where they could pay a high amount of rent, they're living with me. And he's going to a better school. It's a black principal, and she refused for her school to fail.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I can agree with what you were saying. Because if we don't speak up about these schools, our kids are not going anywhere.
That's very true.
Thank you.
And that's what they call the pipeline to jail.
Yes.
The school is the pipeline to jail. And they put a lot of them in special ed and should never have been in special ed.
True. True.
Yeah, they should never have been in special ed classes. But you do a psychological test in battery, they're smart. It's just the fact that they're not doing things exactly the way the teacher wants it done. Doesn't mean that they don't know the answer. But she doesn't understand how they did the answer, and she punishes them.
Right. This is Shirley, and I've been working with Board of Education since my kids. Now it's the grands. And I find out just what you said on there. If the child is smart, they never answer him, especially colored. They always answer the other ones. But I find out if you work with the child at home in the best way you can, things will work out. I have a grandson that finished, didn't go to college, but now is a supervisor in housing. So you don't have to go to college to get the higher position, especially when you're working with the child. And you tell the child, just because his color is not the other color, he still can do the work. And that's what we have been doing. I have a son that's a supervisor, never went to college. But you just have to work with them because you can overcome some of these teachers are not really teachers. They
Yeah. Well,
somebody
what I'm
just
telling you is that when you find that aren't teaching, you do like in the community, the Parent Teachers Association says, get rid of this, but she's not doing what that's not doing what he's doing. And you go to the school board and demand the school from your school. And that's how you get top. When you are right on top of who's, and don't let them dump, reject teachers into your.
Dr. Nichols, I'm sorry, Sister Shirley. Dr. Nichols, talk about the importance of a second language.
Language. Okay. In Europe, children learn in many countries English as language. In China, same thing. Now they start preschool learning how to do little things, and then they have grammar, spelling, and punctuation in English school. So that by the time they are fluent in writing, because English, the universal language, but just like we speak, we have to learn other languages in order to going overseas. My son, Stroud College, he left China, and he is Chinese, and he has excellent job, but in Chinese. I don't mean just good morning, hello, how are you? It's the down report in his field in Chinese. So what I'm sharing with you, children have to learn, and not just, it's too late when you start high school. 4 years of high school, or what have you, is good. You can't write a report if you've had high school classes. Your school should be giving foreign languages consistently. This summer, you put your child, or you can send them away. They're New York's important language. So you summer to one of the islands of the Caribbean, where they speak Spanish. Camps there like summer. Child swims half the other half day. So when they come back, a nurse in a hospital does a nurse Spanish as well as English, and many of these jobs may be that you are bilingual, and we have to create opportunity for our children.
I'm sorry, you said we have to create
that opportunity for our children.
Going back, you said during the summer, because of our reception here, it goes in and out. But don't worry about that.
Okay.
During the summer.
In the summer, you can send a child to the islands in the Caribbean. Now, you can send them to a Spanish island, or you can send them to Guadeloupe or Martinique for summer camp. And the summer camp is half day of school and half day swimming and what have you. Now, the reason I say that is because they will learn the language by playing with other children. All winter long, they study the language, the I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, you are, they are. They've learned those things. Now they have to practice them daily. And what happens is they become fluent in the language. That is the speaking of it. when they come back to class, they increase their fluency in reading and writing the language. So that when they go for a job in the bank, post office, a nurse, hospital, receptionist, and they ask, "Are you bilingual?" They can say, "Yes, I'm fluent in English and Spanish." And that's increasingly important because we have a larger Spanish population in this country than ever before. And all you have to do is look around and you see in the hospital and other places, bank and every other places, something in English and something in Spanish. And in some places, when you go to the counter, you see primarily Hispanics working in bank positions because they are bilingual.
Questions at the
Does that
table?
make sense?
Yes, sir. It makes big sense. Sister Shirley, Sister Charlene, Sister Eva, they, you have dropped the bomb on them. And you dropped.
Well, I know when I was
Yeah.
in school, I couldn't speak English. I spoke English. I mean, English was my better subject, and when they gave me Spanish, it really was another language to me. I couldn't pass another language. I didn't pass another language. I don't know if it was because I wasn't pushed that hard to do it. Because
Well, it depends sometimes on who was teaching it.
True.
Sometimes it's teaching.
Well, I couldn't get it, but my
But
granddaughter's
they
doing it.
let me tell you, one way to get children excited about looking at another language is you turn the television on to a television show like a